Okay, welcome to the first video in exploring and understanding data. Part B, obviously, year 12. We're going to be looking at collecting data, a bit of a review on types of data, and posing good survey questions. Okay, so what's important to note is that we need to start with learning goals. So for this video, we're aiming to understand the importance of statistics and basically be able to define statistics, recall types of data, categorize data as a census or survey, and pose and analyze questions. It's a bit of a reminder. Please make sure you write these down, of course. Okay, next we're going to look at types of data. So we have a few different definitions here that you want to make sure you get down. To begin with, we want variable. So a variable is a characteristic. It is what's being observed, counted, or measured. It is important that you're able to identify a variable and use that correct terminology when in the exam. Categorical data. So categorical data is information about variables that can be grouped into categories. So categorical data can be further classified as nominal, which means that there's no order or relationship, or it can be classified as ordinal, which means it has an order, first, second, third, that kind of deal. So categorical data are variables that can be grouped into categories. Now, the opposite or the other type is numerical data. Now, numerical data provides information about variables that can be counted or measured. Or measured. So numerical data can then be further classified as discrete, which means you can count them, or continuous, meaning you could measure them. So let's just add those couple of extra definitions in there. So categorical can be nominal, and that's no order or relationship, or ordinal, with order, so having order. Numerical data can be discrete, which means it can be counted, generally sort of whole counting numbers, not in between, and continuous. Think number line, you know, anywhere along a number line, meaning it can be measured. Excellent. Now basically we can show this, just you might want to pause and get some of this information down. However, we can actually show this the best using a graphic organizer. So if we have, so we've got our two different types, categorical data grouped into categories, numerical data, counted or measured, so categorical and numerical, Categorical data could be split into nominal or ordinal. So nominal means no order. iColour has no order. Ordinal, 5-star movie rating. So 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star. So those number of stars are the different categories, and they definitely have order. Numerical data, counted or measured. So discrete is your counting numbers. So runs in cricket, you know, it's 1 run, 2, 3, 4, you know, you can't have 1.5 runs. It's 1, 2, 3. Generally whole counting numbers. And then our continuous data are things like the height of a tree, things that can be measured. So the height of a tree can be measured along a scale in millimetres, centimetres, whatever. But we can also have partials. So again, think number line. So this would be the best thing for you to be copying down. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of examples now. We'll just run through categorising some of this data. So I've got some variables here, and we're just going to classify the type of data that each of them represents. So number of supporters at a soccer game, that's a variable. Now I'm going to look at that. Number of supporters, that tells us straight away it's numerical. It's going to be a number value, not a category. And it's going to be discrete. So, and discrete. Because it's going to be counting numbers. We're not measuring anything. We're counting the number of supporters. Types of breakfast cereal can be put into groups, okay? So it's categorical. And when we look at that, it's the order isn't important at all. We're not rating them, so it's nominal data. Body temperature is again numerical, where we're going to be measuring it using numbers, and because we are measuring it, it's continuous. And that's because it could be 32.7 degrees, or, you know, anywhere along that number line idea. So, and finishing position in a horse race. Now, it's a position. While it involves numbers, you can't count or measure these numbers, but we can group the positions into categories like first place, second place, third place, etc. And in that case, the order is important. So it is categorical. So don't get tripped up just because there's numbers there. Categorical, first, second, third. And because the order actually matters, it's going to be ordinal. Okay, so make sure you've copied down this example. Okay, so now you're going to have a go. Just pause the video and go in and grab your textbook from over in the cupboard and have a go at questions 1 to 3 on page 8. It shouldn't take you too long. Just have a go at classifying some variables as types of data, and then you can come back to the video. Okay, so now we're going to look at preparing to collect data. Okay, so data can be obtained by means such as making observations, taking measurements, or asking questions. So a questionnaire is a convenient way of obtaining data. Very handy. Now, often the way that we give out that questionnaire is to survey people. And we survey them using a questionnaire. We have them fill one out. Not always, sometimes we ask them the questions, but often it's using a questionnaire. The questions should be unbiased, easy to understand, and written in such a way that only a small range of appropriate responses are possible to allow for easy analysis. It's important to think about the type of data you're collecting and therefore anticipating the possible responses beforehand. Okay, so let's look then at posing good questions. So, what is it that actually makes good questions? So, first of all, questions used for a survey should be unbiased. So we don't want to lead people down to choose a preordained answer. We don't want them to be going towards a particular answer in any way. They should be easy to understand. So nice and simple. It is then also less likely that your subjects will misinterpret what you're actually wanting them to understand. And written so that to allow a small range of responses, of appropriate responses, really. We also want them, actually, sorry, we'll just get rid of that. We want it so that it's easy to analyse. Okay, nice and easy to analyse at the end. So you need to think about that outcome before what it is you're trying to get before writing those questions. Open-ended questions, so ones that don't have a yes-no type answer, we normally place them into categories. So, give you an example. So we put them into categories. Let's give an example, e.g., what is your favourite food? That's a pretty open-ended question, yeah. So people could give you so many different answers. So what you do is you actually give them categories. Fruit. You would have seen this before, I'm sure. Veggies, seafood, and easy. And then basically they choose from those which represents closest their favourite food. Okay, and so now we have a look at, what we should do to prepare good questions for surveys. So don't ask vague or ambiguous questions. Now what that means is you don't ask questions that really don't seem to have an answer, or what is the meaning of a life, or questions that they find really difficult to interpret. I'm not quite sure what they're asking. So you be very specific with them. So avoid slang, definitely, and abbreviations, because you can't be guaranteed that the people reading your survey will know those abbreviations. Definitely avoid bias. There's a lot of things. We will look at bias in more detail a little later, and emotive language. So we don't want to be trying to persuade them in any way. Don't use leading questions. So again, they are the ones that lead towards an expected response. You're kind of pushing them towards something you want them to say, and that defeats the purpose of a survey or questionnaire. And then ensure your questions are capable of being answered by, oh, that is not how you spell capable. So you want to make sure that you think about who it is that you're actually asking to answer these questions. So you wouldn't do a survey on teachers and then use those same questions on maybe year 7 students. Different audience, different ages, or you wouldn't take that same survey down to a kid in Undurba. You would have to make the language more friendly towards a primary school student. Okay, so make sure you get down these to remind you of good survey questions. Okay, so what's wrong with these questions? So what I want you to do is pause the video, and each one of these is a different question. And I want you to just have a look and think to yourself, maybe chat with the person next to you if you're watching this with someone, and decide what's actually wrong with these. Okay, so let's have a look. So what is your height in inches? What's the problem there? The word inches. Even I don't know my height in inches. So when I went through high school, through all of school, it was a metric system. So I don't work in inches. I wouldn't know my height in inches. So how much do you earn? What's wrong with this? Most people are really unlikely to answer this. It's personal information. If you are going to ask something like this, you need to give a range. So like a 0 to 20,000, 20 to 50,000, 50 to 100,000, more than 100,000. And they are more likely to actually answer something that has a range rather than an exact figure. You agree that we shouldn't be charged more for skim milk than for full cream milk, don't you? Oh, such a leading question. So things like you agree, already telling them the answer that you want, and the don't you, just that kind of reassuring, you do, don't you? Yeah, no. Total leading question. Do you support the Prime Minister's policy on wildlife preservation? Well, let's have a look. It's never a Prime Minister's policy. So generally it's a party policy or a governmental policy. It's very much leading people to say, well, if you're Prime Minister, the person that runs your country, put this policy forward, then you really should be supporting it. Is the GST in Australia less than the VAT in New Zealand? GST, okay, we're Australian, so maybe we know that, but VAT, if you're not New Zealand, a New Zealander, you probably have no idea what that stands for, so no acronyms. Do you support the causes of murderous terrorists who threaten the lives of peace-loving people? Murderous terrorists and peace-loving people. So that language, murderous and peace-loving, is leading people. It is leading your respondents to what you want them to say. It is emotive language, and you don't want to be doing that. Okay, so let's try an example. All right, we want to evaluate some survey questions. Okay, so explain whether the following questions would be appropriate to use on a survey. If not, state how you would make them appropriate. So what colour eyes do you have? Wow, this question could lead to so many different responses because people's idea of eye colour may vary quite a bit. So we're going to go with not appropriate. And what I'm going to do is say to make it appropriate, and I'll just do it up the top here, you would provide responses for them to choose from. Okay, make it nice and easy. So you would say blue, brown, green, and hazel, which is basically all of them. And then we'll just give them other colour, just in case they're very, very picky and don't feel that it, fits into any of those. Okay, so it is important to exercise at least 3 times a week. How often did you exercise this week? So if this question is completely biased, it provides information that could influence a person's answer. So this part here, it is important to exercise at least 3 times a week. Already you are, that sentence is influencing a person to provide an answer that's not entirely accurate. They don't want to look like they're, lazy. So this one is also not appropriate. We'll just go appropriate. And what we would do is we would remove that first sentence and just say, how often did you exercise this week? And then C, how many chocolate bars did you consume today? Totally appropriate. And there's really a small range of answers. It is highly unlikely that people would go more than a few, so that would work quite well. So make sure you get this example down, because now I would like you to head on back to your textbook. Don't forget you can access this online. And you're going to do just questions 4 to 6. They're on page 9, just continuing that exercise. So questions 4 to 6 are your data questions. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at collecting data. So a few more terms we'll explain here. So make sure you get down these terminology. So once the data to collect has been identified and questionnaires have been prepared, we can think about how we will collect our data. So a population, I'll have a look at the word population. So a population is the entire group of interest in a study. So when information is collected from every member of a group, this is called taking a census. So it's often impractical to collect information from every member of a population. So usually we look at a smaller group or a sample that's been selected from the population. So a population is the entire group in a study. A census is when, let's have information is collected from every member of the population, basically. So if the entire population is surveyed, we call it a census, which is what happens in Australia every 5 years. Now, this isn't a very practical way to collect information, as said, so we often use a sample. Now, a sample is a smaller group. Within the population. Now, what's important, and we'll do this one in blue, is that the sample must be representative of the population. Now, 2 factors affecting this are the size of the sample and the selection process. So we'll have a look at those in a moment, but I'll give you an example. So an entire group, so the population of Marumba State Secondary College is every single student, teacher, staff member, everyone in the school. A census would be doing a survey on every single person, every staff member, every teacher, every student, everyone that works there would be surveyed. That would be a census. Now, if we were to take a sample, it needs to be representative of the population. If we just surveyed, a big group of year sevens, that's not representative. We would need to survey some year sevens, some year eights, some year nines. We would need to survey a few from every year level of students. We'd need to survey a few teachers. We'd need to survey a few admin members. We'd need to survey maybe a groundie, maybe a couple of the cleaners, a tuck shop lady. We could keep going. So just, a couple from all over, but it needs to represent the entire population. So let's just move this up a little, because what we need to remember is when we look at sampling. Now, we will look at sampling in a little more detail in the next video, but basically a sample is biased if one or more groups are overrepresented. Sorry. There we go. So samples must be of an appropriate size. So too big is, too impractical to actually then conduct your survey. Too small and you risk your sample becoming biased. And we don't want that. If it's too small, we may not actually have covered all of the groups, and you may be over-representing just some of them. So minimizing the chance of bias, we use a random sample. So we'll just move this up a little. Ooh, straight over. And random sampling, very important. We use this a lot. So random sampling is basically every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected, and therefore you minimise this risk, minimise the risk of bias. Most convenient way to select a random sample is by generating random numbers on a calculator or using Excel. So Excel can also become a random generator. Okay, so make sure you actually have copied these down. Let's move these down a little so you can see before we move on to the next bit. Okay, so finally, I would like you to complete questions 8 and 9 on page 9. I'll get you to skip question 7 because it's asking you to generate a random sample on your calculator, and you don't have graphics calculators. So just questions 8 and 9 to practice some of that collecting data stuff. These are the map questions, by the way, so they're very important that you get those done.